And so then to summarize and recap here at the end of week 6, it's been a long week. We've gone through British art here. We started by glancing at the YBAs, the Young British Artists, who all clustered around Damien Hirst in the late 80s and early 90s, and who put themselves on the map with the Frieze exhibition organized by Hirst in 1988. And we saw that with the various YBAs, they essentially do not take the art process seriously, and they mock the process of art finding meaning in the contemporary world, and they simply laugh at its ability to do that, make fun of it, and thereby disrupt and rupture the art function proper. So in a certain sense, it's an art that invalidates and cancels itself out by way of its own lack of seriousness. It doesn't take itself seriously. So it's purely an art for pranksters, with the exception of Damien Hirst, of course. Then we looked at Francis Bacon, one of Damien Hirst's favorite artists, and we saw how Bacon's work can essentially be divided into a series of phases. The pre-Dyer phase, before he met George Dyer, when he was doing these paintings with his theory of monsters as essentially folded, embryogenetically folded creatures. And then he sojourned down in the underworld for 10 years between 1946 and down to 56 or so. And then he came out of the underworld in the color event that was part of his encounter with the works of Van Gogh that brought him out of the underworld into a fresh, new, vibrant color palette. Then his encounter with George Dyer in 1964 to 1971, when Dyer committed suicide, was a new period of flourishing in his art, in which his semiotic hermetic cube became the essential microcosm, always set in the interior of some kind of room, a room in a house or a flat or an apartment. Was always a central interior, and that we saw that with Dyer's death troubled him to such a degree that that interior began to collapse, become semiotically uncertain of itself, and to disintegrate. The walls disintegrated, and monsters came in when that membrane disintegrated and rendered itself prey. It's as though Bacon's immune system collapsed. Monsters began to come in, and pretty soon the whole thing found itself washed away in a jet of water and covered by a sand dune, and that was essentially the end of Bacon's cosmos. Then we looked at the works of Damien Hirst, and we saw that Damien Hirst's art can largely be divided into two phases. Hirst Phase 1, which was concerned, as we saw, with the study of ontologically de-worlded entities as they exist within the realm of global free trade, the globalization world of ontologically de-worlded entities that are pure figures minus their originating grounds, which he plugs into his semiotic grid, whether it's dots or spots or cigarette butts or fish all swimming in the same direction, doesn't matter. It is the realm of ontologically de-worlded entities that, because they have been de-worlded, have lost all their protections and have come to rely upon science, which treats them as modular units that can be opened up and simply have parts swapped out like parts in an automobile engine. Then we saw that with Hirst Phase 2, he became concerned with religious signifiers, de-worlding religious signifiers from the Catholic tradition, cross-splicing them, hybridizing them, and creating the equivalent of religious GMOs as a new attempt to put into circulation these new signifiers that are missing their signifieds, and so the signifieds have to be made up and supplied by the viewer, essentially. And we looked at Anish Kapoor. We finished the week off by looking at Anish Kapoor, whose entire work is based on the deterritorialization of Hindu signifiers from the Indian religious tradition and cross-spliced with the Western tradition to create works like 1,000 Names, in which all the signifiers had escaped apparatuses of semiotic capture, such as mandalas. And we saw him move on through his fascination with monoliths, and then from monoliths to monumentalizing his various fascinations with holes and vaginal clefts and void fields and interiors, transforming them and letting them loose across the countryside, across the earth, in various installations and museums and so forth. And then in his later work, the fascination with sky mirrors with reflective surfaces that show the collapse and breakdown of all bivalent ontologies that support a heaven, earth, eternity, time, light, darkness, ontological, metaphysical distinction. All of that has collapsed. And I think that Kapoor's sky mirrors essentially illustrate that collapse. And we looked at the evolution of Kapoor's work, and we saw that his significance was that he was creating a sort of rhizome between East and West out of deterritorialized signifiers and cross-fertilizing them with Western signifiers to create a kind of global international art of floating signifiers that are not world-specific. And so that's it in essence. That is week 6. That is the state of contemporary British art. Next week we will move on back to the American world and look at some land art going on there.